The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
Today's world news, what it means, where it's taking us.
I bring you the one and only possible message of world peace.
This is a message of hope, tremendous hope. And he said unto me, you must prophesy again.
The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
It's a day of courage! It's a day of pride! It's a day of victory! This is the day we've been waiting for!
What Israelis are now living through over the past 48 hours is what Palestinians have been living through over the course of the past 56 years.
Israel's inhumane treatment of the Palestinians who live under Israeli occupation.
Israel is an occupying power. The fact that Israel has violated international law.
Is that a reasonable, proportionate, and moral response by Israel?
I love this show. And I love this network, but I've got to ask, who is writing the scripts?
I remember going through 9/11 and waking up the next day, the next week, in the days, and everything had changed, and it's the same thing again, but worse.
That's the trailer for our documentary, Israel's 9/11. We created that about a year and a half ago, and it's gotten a lot of views on Rumble. And we thought it was fitting to show it again today. We just, our crew was able to visit so many of the places that were hit by that Hamas attack, that invasion into Israel on October 7. So we'll talk about that some today, as well as quite a few other things going on in the news. You're listening to Stephen Fleury, and this is the Trumpet Daily. We appreciate you joining us on today's show. You can get to the live video stream of this show at trumpetdaily.com or at the Rumble channel, rumble.com/Trumpet Daily. As I mentioned on Friday, we're broadcasting from our institute in Jerusalem. So Jerusalem, of course, is God's city. It's going to be an eternal city, headquartered by Jesus Christ. I mean, Jesus Christ's government is going to be set up in this city. So it's not a city of peace today, but it will be. What it is today, I mean, it's a cross-section of just about everything. You've got every religion here. You've got every kind of people, every kind of ethnicity. You've got lots and lots of contention, violence as well. Certainly, as you saw there in that trailer, I mean, there's a lot of neighbors with Israel that want to destroy it, that want to kill the Jews. You heard the one imam there saying, this is a victory. We've been waiting for this. You know, as President Trump gets together with Prime Minister Netanyahu today in Washington, they ought to go back and look at this history to understand what they're dealing with, to better understand who they're making a deal with. How do you change this mindset? I mean, we're hearing so much about deals and about the Trump administration pressuring Bibi Netanyahu toward a ceasefire with Hamas, but you let them survive after they did what they did on October 7? Herbert Armstrong, when he wrote Mystery of the Ages, right near the end of his life, he talked about how that Genesis 3 was really impressed on his mind there toward the end of his life, and the fact that this is not God's world, that the world is cut off from God. And when you see these atrocities, even when you look at the natural disasters, the so-called natural disasters, the one happening right in the heart of Texas at the moment, this massive flooding, flash flooding over the weekend, over the July 4th holiday weekend. I think the death count now is up to 80, and there's still a couple dozen missing, lots of them little girls at a camp, a youth camp. And as Sam was saying earlier, it just seems like so many of these things happen around the time when we have our youth camp. That's starting today in Edmond, Oklahoma. But there are reminders every day, it seems. I mentioned this or made this point when God was delivering our Celtic Throne performers out of Israel during the war with Iran. There are just reminders everywhere that this is not God's world. I mean, people should be, whether it's October 7 or mass flooding, I'm just kind of astounded that there aren't more people asking why. Why is this happening? Why did God allow it? What can we learn from this? I mean, Israel is certainly hitting back at Hamas, at Hezbollah, at Iran. But how do you change this mindset? How do you fix the problem? Well, that's why you need Mystery of the Ages, that book that Mr. Armstrong wrote in the last year of his life, because it answers all of the most important questions that we should be asking. Just coming back to this mass flood or mass flooding in the heart of Texas. Listen to this montage, clip 4.
People need to know today will be a hard day. It will be a hard day.
What a flash flood looks like, where you have a 26 to 30 foot rise in the water in a matter of an hour, 4 to 6 a.m. on a holiday.
Sis, we can tell you at this hour, at least 80 people are now confirmed dead. Dozens remain missing.
They talked about those missing campers from Camp Mystic that we've been focusing on for several days now, ever since those floodwaters started to rise early Friday morning. 10 girls are still missing. One camp counselor is still missing. Context, that's not the only camp that sits along the Guadalupe River there. There's about a dozen or so other camps that are in that area, and nearly none of them evacuated out, despite there being National Weather Service warnings issued on Thursday afternoon about flooding concerns.
When you're talking about 26 feet of water in 45 minutes, there is simply no way to prepare for that. It is a tragedy, and those politicizing it ought to be ashamed of themselves.
And Joe, again, we cannot tame Mother Nature at all.
Well, I mean, the Bible has a lot to say about Mother Nature. It certainly does. We have a booklet, Why Natural Disasters. Why? I mean, why did God allow it to happen? Right there in the heart of Texas. You look at what we were able to see yesterday. Everywhere we went down south here in Israel, to Sderot, you see guns, you see rifles, handguns. We saw a military base. We saw above ground bomb shelters at bus stops. And then you have all these places that got hit on October 7. They've essentially turned into graveyards. The Nova Music Festival, all of these memorials, all of these tributes to almost 400 people that were slaughtered at that music festival. 1,200 in total. Hamas had been planning it with the help and the sponsorship of Iran. They had been planning it for months. They timed it to coincide with a Jewish holy day. Douglas Murray, in his book on democracies and death cults, that's what Israel's dealing with. It's a death cult. He said, sometimes a flare goes up and you get to see exactly where everyone is standing. The morning of October 7, 2023 was just such a moment. I mean, it should have been a moment of clarity. You know where everyone stands. You look at the parades of support for Hamas and you think, okay, they support this. They support this massacre. And then you hear the imams chanting about how it's a day of courage. It's a day of victory. It's a clarifying moment. It should be. In the days following, if we didn't play the clip, we quoted the Hamas fighter who called his parents in Gaza as he was murdering Jews. And he said, I killed 10 with my own hands. And when they asked him about when he was coming home, he said, I'm not coming home. I'm going to kill as many as I can. In Douglas Murray's book, he said about October 7, Himmler and his SS were among the most evil people in human history, yet even they had sought to cover over their crimes. Here, in 2023, in the form of Hamas, were people who were boasting of their crimes, were proud of their crimes, and indeed wanted to broadcast their crimes for all to see. They wanted to circulate the video footage, whereas the Nazis wanted to cover it up because they knew it was a crime against humanity. But that thinking is not there with Hamas or Iran. They think they're doing God's service. They think they're doing God's will. These are the people that the Trump administration, and then if Israel just gets pulled into it, these are the people that they're trying to make a deal with. It's like Melanie Phillips said, dealing with the devil. Dealing with the devil. Making a deal with the devil. There's Douglas Murray in his book talks about how a lot of those communities, those kibbutzes, settlements, whatever you want to call them, down south along the border of Gaza, the Jewish communities, he mentions that a lot of them, they were actually like aid workers going into Gaza, helping the Palestinian people. A lot of them maybe leaning to the left politically. There's obviously conservatives among them too. But there's a lot of people, at least before October 7, who were down there and thought, you know what, if we're just nice, we can coexist. They can be our neighbors. Well, then on the morning of October 7, the bombs started flying overhead, providing cover for the terrorists, hundreds and hundreds of them, who came through the border and went to all those towns and that music festival and Sderot, and they had the firefight at the police station. And Israel finally had to bomb the police station because there were so many terrorists in there. What a day. Israel's 9/11, just looking at the population size of this country and comparing it to the United States on 9/11, it's Israel's 9/11 many times over. That's what it amounts to. And how do you make a deal? How do you make a deal with people that vow to destroy you? This was President Trump yesterday ahead of his meetings with the Netanyahu government this week. Clip 6.
Still optimistic about a Gaza deal next week? There could be a Gaza deal next week, yeah. How optimistic are you? I'm very optimistic. But
look, on one hand, there is something of a Groundhog Day quality to Middle East peacemaking. We've seen it all many times. But I do think there's slightly better prospects right now. One is, as you suggest, Prime Minister Netanyahu has a bit more political space in the aftermath of Iran. Second of all, President Trump has an awful lot of leverage. And the Israelis understand that there's no end run around President Trump here. It's not as though they can go to the leaders of the Democratic Party and exact leverage. So ultimately, they've got to work with President Trump. And then Hamas has reason to want to have a ceasefire. The relentless Israeli attacks on Gaza, upwards of 50, 60,000 people have been killed. Probably 15, 20,000 of them were members of Hamas. So they've also got reason to calm things down. We're not talking about long-term peace, but some type of a 2-month ceasefire. I would think the odds are better than even.
message be on Gaza to Netanyahu? I think we're close to a deal on Gaza. We could have it this week.
So that was President Trump saying he's close to a deal with Gaza to Hamas. He should have been a little more precise with his language, because who runs Gaza? Hamas does. And Hamas is the ones that they attacked Israel. They came in celebrating about killing Jews, murdering young people, women, children. This is from, just skipping ahead in my notes, grief-stricken mothers wailing helplessly as their terrified children were violently torn from their arms. Couples separated at gunpoint, men to the right, women to the left, and marched away in separate directions. Entire families rounded up and shot. Elderly, disabled women, unable to even get up by themselves, carted into automobiles by force. Panic-stricken youths running for their lives from a hail of bullets into forests, seeking shelter by crawling under bushes and into ditches. We saw some of these places yesterday. A bomb shelter, for example, where 41 people, this was just a tiny little square, a concrete square next to a bus stop, and 41 Jews crammed in there as they hear Hamas approaching, speaking Arabic, firing away with their rifles, and then coming up to the bomb shelter and throwing grenades inside to kill Jews. Any Jew, man, woman, child, elderly. And then their parents, the parents of these terrorists, celebrating their suicide mission. That's how Hamas celebrates the death of their children. They think it's glorious, so long as they go out killing some Jews. And then the Israeli people, of course, they mourned. They still are in mourning in many ways over what happened on that day. The last great day, that's the holy day that the Bible speaks of. That's when it happened. And I guess we're supposed to just move on and forget about it and make a deal with these people? It's pretty amazing. The staggering cost, this is an article that came out in Tablet not that long after October 7. The staggering cost and simply unfathomable numbers of the many hundreds of murdered and kidnapped Israelis from Saturday's deadly Hamas attack from Gaza have already been dubbed by Israel or Israelis as our own national 9/11 or Pearl Harbor. But unfortunately, given the nature and the scale of the horrific crimes perpetrated against Israelis, the vast majority of them, civilians, not soldiers, including many children, women, and the elderly, the more appropriate analogy is that of the Holocaust. They just want to kill the Jews, just like Hitler did in World War II. What's behind this? Go and read chapter 8 of the Key of David booklet, my father's booklet, about this spirit of anti-Semitism, this hatred of Jews. Is this of God? Is this God's world? It's just more proof that we're living in Satan's world. If you needed any more proof Well, here it is. Here's another example. We're not living in God's world. We're living in the devil's world. 9 million people in this little state of Israel. And if Hamas had the firepower, as I said recently, they would have killed 10,000 Jews if they could have. They would have killed all 9 million. That's the goal. That's the objective. And these are the people that we're negotiating with. Bibi, as I say, Bibi Netanyahu, he's in the United States today, this week, negotiating. Jonathan Tobin had a story. Israel owes Trump, but that can't mean Hamas's survival. So President Trump thinks he has quite a lot of leverage because of the strike on the nuclear facilities in Iran. But then you've got commentators here saying, I hope Bibi doesn't compromise too much or try to please President Trump too much. It says here, the president wants to end the war in Gaza so he can make more regional deals in the region. But as much as Jerusalem must defer to him, there must be limits to that gratitude. I mean, how far can we go? In other words, how much can we compromise? Should we let Hamas survive? That's what he's getting at here. President Donald Trump's decision to order a strike on Iranian nuclear targets was yet another example of how he has proven to be a reliable friend of the state of Israel. Yet exactly how far should Netanyahu go to pay that debt when the president demands that he go along with plans that may or may not be in his country's best interests? Now, we've talked a lot recently even about Israel, little Israel, eventually reaching out to the Assyrians, eventually reaching out to Germany for help because they have no help, because they're alone. Well, right now they're in discussions with the United States, which has been a traditional ally of Israel. But as Tobin brings out here, Donald Trump wants a ceasefire, no matter the cost. That's what Witkoff is traveling around the region to secure as well. A ceasefire, no matter the cost. He says here, it may be that in the coming days, weeks, and months, the world will find out the answer to that question. Well, how far is Netanyahu willing to go? That's the question, to pay the debt to President Trump. It says it's now being widely reported that Israel has agreed to the terms of another ceasefire hostage release deal with the Hamas terrorists that is being pushed by the president. So pressured to cease fire, to stop firing away. How eerie is it, by the way, as we're traveling down in the south and you hear these explosions off in the distance somewhere in Gaza. It's a war-torn region. And yes, the Israelis are in the midst of a counteroffensive. Why? Well, in response to October 7. You've got people celebrating the death of Jews. You've got people celebrating the Hamas attack. And now you've got Western leaders saying, hey, let's just stop the firing and make a deal. Make a deal with Hamas. It says, if leaks about America's offer to the Islamist group are true, it will mean the release of 10 of the remaining living hostages without being first humiliated by revolting ceremonies in which they would be forced to thank their kidnappers. You've seen this before, right? The hostages, when they're released and they have to go and congratulate their kidnappers on TV because Hamas and their supporters, they love it. They love humiliating Jews, even as they release them from captivity. Tobin says here, if that's all there is to it, that's a deal that Netanyahu, who will visit Washington this week, so this is going on. I mean, the Middle East is big in the news right now. We're here at the right time, as I was saying on Friday. It says, as can even the most right-wing members of his government, but as the prime minister has stated, he believes that any deal must not obligate Israel to end the war on Hamas without forcing the surrender of all remaining hostages and bodies. This was something that, if you remember, President Trump insisted on back in January in the lead up to his inauguration, and it never happened, did it? I mean, here we are now in the midst of July, and there's hostages still there. There's dead bodies, dead Jewish bodies still there. It says here, should the United States force an end to the conflict, without that happening, no amount of rhetoric from Trump or Netanyahu will prevent Hamas from claiming victory. And despite all the losses they have sustained since starting this war while committing unspeakable atrocities on October 7, such boasts will be largely accurate. In other words, Hamas is going to declare victory, and as Tobin writes at Jewish News Syndicate, they're right. If they survive, and they don't even have to return all the hostages, they win. Israel loses. And I guess the United States is happy. At least we got a ceasefire. And now we can make peace. The Trump administration, for all of its strengths and its show of courage at times, I mean, this rush, to get in there, bomb the nuke facilities and get out, and now get Bibi Netanyahu in town. Let's stop the shooting in Gaza. Let's get a ceasefire and expand the Abraham Accords and make peace throughout the region. Well, the attack on October 7 was, as Doug Murray says, it was a clarifying moment. And you see right away, okay, this is their objective. This is what they want. This is who is on their side. It says, to date, Netanyahu has reiterated that he won't allow that to happen. But if Hamas is prepared to act in accordance with its best interests as opposed to its bloodthirsty ideology and Trump demands it, would he be forced to give in? Is Netanyahu going to be forced to compromise? Operation Rising Lion. He's featured on the cover of the Trumpet magazine, the latest issue. You can go to that or see that at thetrumpet.com. He's shown some courage. I mean, he's hit back hard against Hamas. He's decapitated the leadership of Hezbollah. He unleashed this secret attack on Iran just a few weeks ago, and was able to get U.S. support for bombing those nuke facilities. And now President Trump wants something in return. He wants peace. He wants a ceasefire. It says here, there's no question that the U.S. president is willing to pressure Israel, whether publicly or privately, when he thinks that it's in his interests. His profane demand that Israeli planes be turned around before striking Iran again when Tehran violated the ceasefire is an example. He's referring back to the profanity-laced tirade of the president a couple weeks ago. He just wanted the shooting to stop. He wanted the mullahs to survive. He wants Hamas to survive. I think we're close to a deal with Hamas, said the president yesterday. It makes you think of the years under the dear leader during the fake presidency. We played this in the days following October 7. This clip from Jake Sullivan. He was, at the time, he was the national security advisor to Joe Biden. And he made this remark about, I think it was 7 or 8 days before October 7. This is clip 1.
And what we said is we want to depressurize, de-escalate, and ultimately integrate the Middle East region. The war in Yemen is in its 19th month of truce. For now, the Iranian attacks against U.S. forces have stopped. Our presence in Iraq is stable. I emphasize for now because all of that can change. And the Middle East region is quieter today than it has been in 2 decades.
He said that 8 days. 8 days before October 7. And then the war expanded. And Iran was working behind the scenes, planning October 7. Even as he was saying, the Middle East, it's been so quiet. We have so much peace. This is just the last bit. I've got my voice in the feedback. It says, Tobin says, the president has reason to think Israel owes him a lot for what he has done, but that gratitude cannot take the form of agreeing to measures that are not merely antithetical to its security, but the realities of its post-October 7 existence. Netanyahu is loath to say no to Trump. Doing so could spoil an essential relationship. See, they're desperate. They've got to have U.S. support. But Donald Trump has got to have a ceasefire. So who's going to budge? Where do you meet in the middle? It says here, doing so, that would be saying no to Donald Trump. Doing so could spoil an essential relationship with an irreplaceable ally, further isolate the Jewish state abroad, and put him in a difficult position politically at home. It says no one in Israel wants to find out how Trump, despite his consistent support for Israel, will react to being thwarted when he thinks a deal is on the table. The push for a deal, that's what we're going to hear about this week as the news unfolds. And as I said at the top, this would be a good week. If ever there was a good week to be reminded of what happened almost 2 years ago, less than 2 years ago, in Sderot, at that Nova festival, in those little settlements, right near the border with Gaza. As I say, Reuters at the time called it the worst breach in Israel's defenses since Arab armies waged war in 1973. The IDF said it was 9/11 and Pearl Harbor wrapped in one. That's what Israel faced less than 2 years ago when Hamas fired those 2,000 rockets and then punctured that security barrier and came streaming in their trucks, on their motorcycles, well armed with grenades, rifles, machine guns, handguns. They had rocket launchers as well. You look at a picture from back then on the road we were just on yesterday, and you had all these burned out, hollowed out cars. Israel was, the Jews down there were just trapped. They couldn't get out to the north or the south. And it went on for hours. In some cases, till the next morning. It wasn't just in and out for 30 minutes. There were people hiding in this dumpster at that music festival for 4.5 hours, hoping, praying that Hamas wouldn't discover them. 13 people hiding in garbage in a metal dumpster. And then 4.5 hours later, one lone terrorist discovers them and just starts firing away, killing 9 of them. Any Jews that they could find. And then in the case of the one, he called his parents. He was so happy. And they wanted to film it and they wanted to show the world. And then, making it worse even, you had people turn out by the tens of thousands in America, in Britain, to show their support for these terrorists, these barbarians. It should have been a clarifying moment, right? Douglas Murray says so in his book. But a lot of people don't think that way. A lot of people, the narrative now is that Israel is the problem. That's what you saw it even in the trailer we played. It's Israel who's occupying these Palestinian areas. It's Israel who's carrying out genocide. How does that happen? How does that narrative or that message get so twisted and perverse It's because this is not God's world. It's the devil's world. This is from the New York Post back in December of 2023. It says here, a beautiful woman with the face of an angel was raped by 8 to 10 Hamas terrorists on October 7, while another tragic victim was beheaded with a shovel trying to defend herself. She was about to be raped as well. She fought back and they beheaded her with a shovel. In the case of the other one, she was raped 8, 9, 10 times and then shot dead afterward. And there were witnesses to a lot of these atrocities. And I got another story just last night. You've got people a year and a half on that witnessed the carnage, the horror, and they're committing suicide or they're being submitted to mental institutions. Because in the case of one, I had to watch my girlfriend get raped. And then somehow he survives. How do you live with that? If you see your little children beheaded or burned alive and you manage to survive, I mean, the tragedy continues. It didn't end on October 7. It continues to this day. It's real. War is real. We saw it yesterday. We heard explosions in the background. You see guns everywhere. You see a military base. You see tanks. There's prophecies in the Bible that talk about turning that military hardware into, machines that can do farming. There is coming a time. You can see the desperate need for God's government to fill this earth and to finally change the wicked nature of man. I mean, man has been able to really carry out some of the most wicked and heinous atrocities you could imagine. In some cases, you can't even imagine it. Gleefully celebrating the death of a young woman or maybe a little baby because it's Jewish. This is our world. This is our modern world. This is not the atrocity of World War II 80 some years ago. This is happening now. And they want more weapons. And they want bigger bombs so that they can kill more people. Are we really so naive and foolish to think that we can coexist with this kind of evil? To think that we can strike some kind of a deal with this? A deal with the devil. It says here, I saw this beautiful woman with the face of an angel and 8 or 10 of the fighters beating and raping her. She was screaming, stop it already. I'm going to die anyway from what you're doing. Just kill me. Just put me out of my misery. Just put me to death. It says when they finished, they were laughing, and the last one shot her in the head. So they had fun. This was entertainment for them. And then the last one just shot her dead. Shot her in the head. More recently, this was just the other day, from the Jerusalem Post. It's commenting on that death to the IDF chant. That was being chanted at another music festival, this time in Glastonbury, this time in the UK. No one made a remark or had a moment of silence for this woman or these victims, the Jews that were massacred. But they took time out to chant death to the Jews, death to the IDF. Everyone in Israel serves in the IDF. It's mandatory. So the IDF, that's the Jews. Death to the Jews. And we're not even 2 years removed from October 7. It says this wasn't some underground venue or obscure gathering. This was broadcast live on the BBC. We're not talking about subtle dog whistles or controversial metaphors. This was incitement, open, shameless, And judging by the cheers from the crowd, not unpopular. What has happened? I made this point last week, but what's happening to our nations? America and Britain going to some music festival and they're waving Palestinian flags and chanting death to the IDF. Is this really possible in the UK? In America? It says, while Israel is expected to behave like an angel under missile fire, Britain's own institutions can host incitement to murder on live television and barely raise an eyebrow. It says, if an artist had chanted death to the Palestinians, there would be mass resignations, arrests, and front-page outrage. And rightly so. But death to the IDF? That's just a form of expression. That's just free speech. It says the rot goes deep. It goes deep. He's right. There's a sickness here. There's rot that goes deep into the heart of man. It says here, the chant of death to the IDF was belted out 20 months after Hamas terrorists stormed the Nova Music Festival in southern Israel, a sister festival, if ever there was one. Like Glastonbury, it was a celebration of music, peace, and youth. Only at Nova, the dancing turned into a massacre. The dancing, we'll talk more about that festival at a later time. But when the missiles started coming into Israel, most of them just kept dancing. They're so used to it. They're used to Hamas firing missiles randomly into Israel to kill Jews. And some of them didn't leave or flee the scene until the music stopped. And someone finally got up in front of a microphone and said, "Run for your life. Run for your life. There's no one here to save you. The IDF is not here." And then they finally took off. What a terrifying scene. Again, there's footage of it. People fleeing from murderers. People huddling together in bunkers, bomb shelters, dumpsters. It says here, hundreds of young Israelis were shot, maimed, raped, beheaded, burned alive, kidnapped. Some were hunted down in fields like animals. Others were slaughtered while hiding under stages and DJ booths. Over 360 were murdered in cold blood. Some are still held hostage in Gaza. 360 at that music festival alone. It says many of the festival goers were young women who were paraded half naked through the streets of Gaza City to the cheers of a howling mob. And what has Glastonbury said about this? Nothing. Nothing. No tribute, no moment of silence, no stage side artwork honoring the dead, no spoken word lament, nothing. Instead, they chant death, death to the IDF. Listen to what Nigel Farage had to say about that chant in Glastonbury, clip 2.
The rot has now set in very, very deep. Can you imagine if anybody on that stage had advocated, killing Muslim leaders? I mean, they'd be in prison. Yep. They'd be in prison. This is all completely one way round. There's a woman called Lucy Connolly who put out one intemperate tweet, one tweet, after the Southport murders, the horrific murder of those young girls last year. She's serving a 31-month prison sentence. And to date, no charges have been brought either against this guy or kneecap the Irish Republicans who've advocating killing members of Parliament, literally killing members of Parliament. So we have a completely twisted, bent judiciary and police force.
This is not God's world. It's completely twisted and bent, as Farage said there. In so many different ways, you see evidence like a red light siren going off that this is the devil's world. What if you were chanting death to Muslim imams? What would the reaction be like in the UK or even in America? Melanie Phillips, she's based here in Jerusalem. She says, even though incitement to murder crossed a red line among politicians and commentators, many still qualified their revulsion by asserting that Israel's behavior in the war was beyond the pale. So, I mean, the rhetoric was so hateful, it was so racist, that even politicians in the BBC in the UK had to come out with, half-hearted apologies. But then they qualify their revulsion, like she says, by saying, well, you have to look at the IDF. I mean, look at what Israel's doing. Look at the genocide they're carrying out. It says here a further example of that was provided this week when Channel 4 TV screened a film about the Gaza Strip. The BBC had abandoned its plan to broadcast this documentary, quote unquote, in the fallout after it was revealed that the narrator of a previous film was the son of Hamas's deputy minister of agriculture. So here's Hamas working in bed with the BBC. The Channel 4 film was pure Hamas propaganda, alleging that the IDF deliberately bombed Gaza hospitals without acknowledging that they had all been turned into Hamas terrorist hubs, and thus were legitimate military targets as well as examples of Hamas war crimes. This is just routine for Hamas. When Israel unleashed its counteroffensive, and a lot of the Palestinians in Gaza City fled south, some of them were gunned down by Hamas because Hamas needs them as human shields. A Hamas terrorist, he wouldn't think twice about getting behind someone that's in a wheelchair on the street. That's good cover for him. That's the way they operate. This is the way they think. They tyrannize their own people, and then they kill as many Jews as they can. These are not people you negotiate with. You can't make a deal with these people. It says, yet not only did Channel 4 air this travesty, but more than 400 entertainment stars and media figures, including 111 BBC journalists, signed a letter to the BBC's management claiming that its decision to drop the Gaza film demonstrates once again that the BBC is not reporting without fear or favor when it comes to Israel. You're being biased by not filming or playing this Hamas propaganda. And all these hundreds of people, journalists, celebrities, sports stars, I mean, where do they get this mindset? The spirit of Hamas propaganda is so strong. And you see it in Glastonbury. You see it in the universities of today. You see it in the demonstrations that take to the streets following October 7. This is certainly not God's world. I mean, here in Israel, the guy at the hotel told me the other day, he said, after this weekend, you'll be one of 5 people staying in the hotel. I mean, tourists aren't coming here. Israel's the bad guy. And, it is a war-torn region. You can't blame people for not coming at this time. But what a world. What a world. Melanie Phillips says, looking at the Labor government's boycott and sanctions against Israel, or the election of 5 members of parliament on a Gaza-Palestine platform, or the refusal by the British police to hold to account those on the street chanting, globalize the intifada. I mean, you can say anything you want about the IDF or the Jews. But like Farage brought out, I mean, you send out one tweet that's in the other direction, you're going to be in jail. You're going to go to jail. It says here, it's a bad mistake to think that what happens in Britain stays in Britain. The point of her piece is that it's spreading. This anti-Semitism, this Muslim-fueled hatred of Jews, it's spreading into the West. And people don't even talk as much as they should about Muslim hatred for Jews. Certainly not every single Muslim hates Jews, but a lot of them do. Certainly those in the terrorist organizations. How do you change that spirit, that hatred? It says here, the Palestinian cause is a Trojan horse for radical Islam, laundering the Islamist death cult through using the language of humanitarianism and anti-colonialism by falsely painting Israel as the oppressor of the Palestinian Arabs. It's a false narrative. It's Hamas propaganda. This, as she says later, this Muslim hatred of Jews is founded in Islamic religious text. So it's in their books. It's in their education. It's on their television. It's in their movies. And young Palestinians or Arabs, Muslims, they grow up on a steady diet of this hatred for Jews. Kill the Jews. Obviously, this is not God's world. It should be obvious. It says, going back to Douglas Murray's book, he says, I believe that what Israel stared into on October 7 is a reality we might all stare into again at some point soon, and that some of us have already glimpsed. Well, he's right. And my father was saying this right after October 7. This is a little bit of a taste of what's coming on a much larger scale. And then Douglas Murray says that we're going to stare into this again. And how could you dismiss that when you look at the widespread support and for Hamas, for Iran, for Hezbollah, and then the deal making, Western leaders getting in there saying, hey, just stop the shooting. Don't eliminate Hamas. Don't eliminate the mullahs. Just stop shooting. Cease fire. And then we'll have peace. Make peace. Can you make peace with the devil? Can you sit down with a murderer who wants to kill you and says so to your face? And say, well, hang on a second. Just sign this deal and everyone's happy. My father wrote, this is November of 2023, the title of the article, A Sign of Worse to Come. It's a sign of something much worse. And he says in this article, we must watch Jerusalem. The city is a powder keg, and it is there that the spark will be lit that ignites a sequence of events leading directly to the end of civilization as we know it. Many prophecies show this. This is the time when we need to be deep into prophecy so that we can know where this is leading, where we can know how the problems are going to be solved. It says here, the violence that unfolded in Israel on October 7 portends an explosion of volatility and violence that will lead to these armies surrounding the holy cities, talking about the Olivet prophecy, where Jesus said, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, it says, stand in the holy place. That's in Matthew 24 and verse 15. And the parallel passage is in Luke 21, where it says, and when you see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is near. When you see armies surrounding Jerusalem, I don't have time to get into all the specifics of that. Maybe we can talk about it later on this week. But going back to my father's point, Jerusalem is the powder keg. This is where the violence is going to set off world war, great tribulation, as it says later in Matthew 24. Verse 21, then let them which are in Judea, that would be little Israel, Judah, flee to the mountains. There's coming a time when people are going to be fleeing again. fleeing from terrorists, fleeing from violence, fleeing from people that want to kill you. Verse 21 of Matthew 24, it says, "For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of this world to this time, no, nor ever shall be." My father said in that article from November 2023, he said, when you see what the butchers of Hamas are doing to Jews, you get a terrifying picture of how fierce Satan's hatred is. It's a picture. It's a foretaste. Verse 22, it says, "And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved, alive, you could add, but for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened." God will intervene and cut it short. Jesus Christ will return to this earth. He's returning to this city, by the way, Jerusalem, the Mount of Olives. Read Zechariah 14. So there is hope. There is a positive ending, but look at what we have to go through to get to that positive outcome, to get to God's timely intervention, to save man from himself. That's where our hope resides, in that return of Jesus Christ and the resurrection of the saints. God's family, the God family vision, Mystery of the Ages, I mentioned that earlier. Make sure you get your copy of that either at the website, thetrumpet.com, or you can call our operators and request a hard copy of that wonderful book written by Herbert Armstrong in the last year of his life. That's all we have time for on today's show, the fastest moving hour in broadcasting. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily. We thank you for joining us today from Jerusalem, and we'll see you again tomorrow.